everyone. My name is Devonya Batiste. I'm the Communications Manager at CHEG. And I would like to thank you all just for being here to talk about something that is so incredibly important. Today, our session is titled Eating or Reading, How Can We Solve Student Hunger? I'm accompanied by some of the most amazing, fantastic, glorious people who are taking these issues head on. And I'm just honored to be sitting right next to them, quite frankly. To my left is Rachel Sumekh. She is the founder and CEO of Swipe Out Hunger, which is the leading nonprofit addressing student hunger on campus. To her left is Matine Khalighi. He is not only the CHEG.org top 10 finalist for the Global Student Prize of 2021, but he is also the founder and chairman of Equal, which is a youth-led, youth-run, and for the youth organization that is addressing houseless students through awareness and education. So I'd like to welcome you both for joining me on this.
Thank
you.
Yeah. So, first I would just like to start off, Matine. Do you mind elaborating a little bit more on your background, like how you got started with Equal? I know that, beyond already the accolades I've said, he is also a full-time student at Harvard, so doing all this work while being a full-time student is crazy. So how'd you get started? Are you managing it well? Is your university kind of helping you as you're doing this? Just tell me more.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited to be here. And yeah, my story in the nonprofit sector really started way back when I was in middle school. I took this community service class that was all about just doing something positive for your community. And a close friend of mine took the same class. And then afterwards, we were very passionate 8th graders with a lot of time on our hands. And we said, we should do something a little bit more. And she was like, yeah. And then we decided to do a service project to help people experiencing homelessness by passing out basic hygiene products to people out on the streets. And, over the course of a few months, we learned that, we could collect leftover food from restaurants. And then we figured out if we got this thing called a 501c3 from this place called the IRS, we could then, start collecting leftover shampoo bottles from hotels and then distributing those. And, within 2 years, we had a really grassroots initiative on our hands. And we were having teens from all across school districts in Colorado come volunteer with us. We had distributed over 50,000 products. And we were also learning about this bigger need of students experiencing homelessness. And we really felt a connection that, we're a nonprofit run by young people, but we're also working to support young people, and what a cool intersection that could be. So we decided to kind of transition our work into Equal, which is the organization that I chair now, which we work with students experiencing homelessness on increasing access to higher education, while also doing a lot of advocacy work. So it's been a lot of fun. Equal's about 1.5 years old. I definitely still am picking up my high school habits of, taking calls between classes, but we're making it happen. But we have an excellent team. We just hired 2 full-time employees. We have 15 paid staff, and a lot of young people really driving the work forward. So
it's amazing.
There's a lot of support with me, but I'm really, really excited about the work we're doing.
Yeah, that's amazing. Quite frankly, when I was in 8th grade, I was just trying to figure out how to do my hair. I was not on that level. So that is awesome. I'm just continually impressed by you. So that's amazing. Thank you for doing what you're doing. It's very important. And Rachel, Swipe Out Hunger is it's just needed, quite frankly, through our research, through CHEG.org, our not-for-profit advocacy and research arm of CHEG. It just shows that student hunger is real, it is present, and how can students really be able to engage with their coursework, really be able to learn their subjects if they're going to bed hungry? I know for a fact, the hangry bit, when you're hungry, that kind of takes over your mind, So, and getting started with Swipe Out Hunger, was there a defining moment in your life where you were like, yes, I have to create Swipe Out Hunger?
Well, I'll start by saying an absolute amen to everything you said. It's unbelievable that we live in a country where we think that once a person steps onto a college campus, for some reason, all of the challenges they faced before that moment go away. That when they were in K through 12 and they got free breakfast and free lunch, and now they're on a college campus, suddenly they don't have to be fed, that they don't have to be supporting their family the same way they were in high school. And so for me, I think very similar to Matine, as activists, we start out with a passion, and it's through staying in the work for long enough to really understand that these issues are systemic, that with us it was, with Swipe Out Hunger, our first program was having students donate the extra money from their meal plans to other students on campus to go in the dining halls, right?
Yeah.
So it was driven by this angst of, why do I have money on my meal plan and another friend is hungry? But that's not a solution to hunger. Hygiene kits are not a solution to homelessness, but it's these moments that if you follow and you listen and you learn and you continue, that help you understand systemic injustice. So anytime I meet activists, I'm just supportive of them to like keep going. And for me, it was one of my friends, Brian, who invited me to step into this work with Swipe Out Hunger. And we spent a hot day in June moving like 8 pallets of food from one side of campus to another. And I saw what we had to do, and it's me and him, and I'm like 18, and I'm like, cool, so we're gonna rain check this until more people can come help us. And he said, no, like we told the school that we were moving this food today. This is our first time getting this program off the ground. We have to make this happen.
Yeah.
And after that, it was like 4 or 5 hours of moving this food, and I was just like, I'm a different person. All because someone said we're doing it when I was like, you know, no. And from that point on, I never wanted to not give someone else that opportunity to realize if they just show up, if they take one action, you can change someone's life. And now I've seen you can create a program that didn't exist before that changes systems and policies. So for me, that moment was really being invited to make a difference, to show up.
Yeah, and that's amazing. You know, you're completely right. The fact that we live in such an abundance of resources of this country, and yet 1 out of 3 students since the beginning of the pandemic have missed a meal at least once a week. At least once a week. So who knows how many times that has actually happened. And in fact, 50% of students have utilized off-campus food banks. So if we had more on campus, who knows how many could actually use those sources and get fed, right? So, you know, as I'm led to believe, both of you are children of immigrants, right? And that comes with its own difficulties. So what do you think are some of the very specific and particular challenges that immigrant students or DACA students, first-gen students might face?
Well, me and Rachel are both Persians, so we have a little bit of...
Not only are we immigrants, but we're the best kind of immigrant. Our parents are from Iran, and that means that we're hospitable, and we love food, and we love seasoning, and we have very textured hair and nice eyebrows. I could go on, but...
Love that,
Yeah.
love that.
You know, I mean, growing up, I've had so much opportunity, and my parents, obviously being immigrants, did come here and give, you know, the best life for my brother and I that they could. But I think something that I can, you know, resonate with other immigrant students is just not a profound knowledge of the public education system to start with. You know, my parents didn't go to middle school or high school here, and, you know, being in the position we were, I was able to go to a good public school and get an education, but I can really understand students who are living in households where, for example, their parents don't speak English. How challenging is it to navigate these spaces when your kids come home with these forms that have all of these documentation required and all of this terminology that they're not really familiar with,
Right.
and this is going to be the way that they're going to get their next meal, because you as a family member can't necessarily provide that. So I really do understand that there is such a divide, and a lot of the programs that we develop might not be as welcoming to you know, families who are just, you know, getting situated in this country, who are not familiar with the culture, who can't speak the language. And, you know, in high school, I went to a high school that was majority non-white, and a lot of these challenges arose. I mean, when DACA was being threatened, my school had a huge march about this, because, a big population in our school was protected by that. More than 60% of the students in my school were on free and reduced lunch. So like, there were these inequities that existed, but at the same time, students who aren't on those programs might not even know about them. And that's really like another problem that I think both of our organizations are working to address, is also not only are people who are working to provide support for these people to really understand their situation, but also everyone else really needs to know what challenges they're going through and how we make it better. It has to be a community effort. But
yeah, well said. There was a panel earlier and someone used the word non-traditional students, which I feel like there's been a movement lately to not use that phrase anymore.
Yeah.
Because 1 in 4 college students are parents, right?
Yeah.
The average age of a college student is 25 years old. So when we think about different demographics, whether it's first-generation students, undocumented students, foster youth, those are the people that not only are the ones in the seats in classes, but the ones who need the most resources.
Exactly.
So my experience as my parents, as we mentioned, immigrated to the United States after Iran was not a hospitable place for religious minorities.
Sure.
It's pretty bad. They're going to kill you. So you kind of have to get out, revolution, all that fun stuff. And that, I think, drive that a lot of families fleeing South America, Central America, families fleeing so many countries come with this passion and commitment to creating a better life. And so I think as many setbacks as I got being a child of immigrants, there are also so many assets that culture and that community gave me that grounded me and said, we don't know how you're going to do this, but you're going to go to college, you're going to figure this out, and you're going to be successful. So growing up and having programs like free and reduced lunch were essential for my parents to have the peace of mind that their kids were going to get fed that day. And now the programs that we run on college campuses, we have over 400 colleges across the US that run food pantries that we support and advise, that run meal swipe donation programs, that make sure that those students have the things that you don't know if that person was gonna have time to go to the food bank, right?
Yeah.
We hear stories of students missing class because they're going to the food bank to get food. It's truly that hour, someone said this earlier as well, the biggest, oh gosh, I'm gonna misquote, but he said the biggest challenge for people in poverty is time. And so as much as we can do to create resources that are on campus, that are helping to have students access what they need, that's what makes a difference. Because when we think about college students, it's not sorority girls and fraternity bros, it's people that need to go to the food pantry. It's foster youth that don't have someone to buy them bed sheets for their dorms. It's people that we forget we have to show up as a society for. And we're starting to do that more and more in K through 12, but we're dropping the ball when it gets to higher ed.
Yeah. And I think the main thing that I'm hearing is really accessibility. And time is privilege at the end of the day. I am that statistic. I graduated when I was 26. I worked full time while I was in school just to exist, essentially, And there were times where I just did not know when I was gonna eat. And it felt so isolating because on one end, I'm trying to navigate time with my professors for office hours, but I literally have to go to work. So I'm trying to work to make the money to eat, and then it's just time.
I'm sure your professors were very understanding and made their schedules available to you to meet with them when you had time. I'm sure.
Yeah. So it became so, it was frustrating, it was isolating, and it was scary sometimes because, I'm trying not to get emotional, but I would be so hungry and tired and still trying to navigate 4 classes a semester. And I just sometimes was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. But at the same time, I felt like I just couldn't go to a food pantry or a food bank because I said to myself, well, you're in college, right? You can't be doing that bad. Oh, if you really needed it, you could sell your car. If you really needed the money, you could sell things. So I was always kind of just rationalizing it.
We asked this in our survey. We asked students, why didn't you come to get this resource sooner? And they always say, I thought someone else needed it more than me.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, like 70% of students believe that there's a stigma around going to food banks. And sometimes I think it's an unconscious stigma, because what was happening with me. I was unconsciously saying to myself, you don't really need it that bad. There's people that are worse off than you. So I had that stigma for that. And, Matine, I know that you have worked specifically to address stigma for students through Equal. I know that you've done this two-pronged approach. Can you kind of enlighten us how that might work so that the audience can really take away, this is the two-pronged approach to say, you do need help and it's okay?
Yeah. I mean, before I get into that, like building off of the point you just made, our scholarship every year for Equal, which I'll kind of talk about in the future, more than, 30% of the students who apply mark that, I haven't experienced homelessness before. But they don't realize, oftentimes as providers, we think it's really obvious, like the language that we use, the kind of, systems that we create. And a lot of times the people who need our help sometimes don't even know that they do need our help, or they don't even know that they're who we're talking about. They don't even know how bad it is getting. So, we ask a question bluntly, have you ever experienced homelessness before? They'll say no. And then we'll say, have you been unsure of where you've been spending the night the last year? And they'll say yes. They were like, oh, well, typically we define that as homelessness. But yeah, so Equal, as I mentioned before, we have two kind of approaches to how we do our work. We run a scholarship program under our Perform category, where essentially we are supporting higher education costs for students experiencing homelessness. How many of you here have gone to higher education? Give me a hand raise, all right. And how many of you, keep your hand raised, think higher education is fairly expensive right now? There we go. So especially for students who are coming from extreme backgrounds of poverty, asking to pay anywhere from a $40,000 to $80,000 a year price tag is not going to be on the table for them. So what we really believe is, can we provide financial support to help these students attain the next level of education? Because overwhelmingly, studies have showed that if students pursue some form of post-secondary education, they're going to be more employable in the workforce. Thus, we can help break a cycle of poverty. But something else we were just talking about is when they're in higher education, what do we do? A lot of times they're first-generation students. They're students who don't know resources available to them. They're going to be struggling with things like food insecurity. So we pair all of our students with a mentor who works with them kind of one-on-one on helping them guide their way through higher education. And so that's really our direct service to students experiencing homelessness. But we understand that one scholarship program is not going to solve the issue of student homelessness in America. We have over 1 million students every year in the K-12 public school system that say they are experiencing homelessness. And as many scholarships as we want to give out, there is a number that we're not gonna, win against. So what do we do? And that's really the inform part of Equal's work, where we work on advocacy work through our chapters program. So we allow young people to create branches of Equal in their schools and communities where they can really work on the issue of student homelessness in that area. And a lot of this looks like local advocacy groups. I think a lot of you know education in America is different from zip code to zip code. So what we really have to do is give young people the platform and the space to make a difference within their community. So a lot of our chapters, do engagement work in their schools. They volunteer with local youth homeless shelters. They work with their district liaisons. They show up at their school board meetings, which a lot of people don't do, which is really, really important, to kind of really inform the trajectory of this issue within their communities. And we know, as corny as it may sound, we want to build a future group of civic leaders, of young people who are going to be professionals at some point in their lives that are going to say, I do know that there are real realities that exist within, education, that when the bell rings, people might be going to sleep in their cars, some might be taking a bus to get to a shelter, some might not know where their next meal is going to be. So I, as an individual who isn't experiencing this, should know that, and be informed on what I am going to do as a future leader.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we were talking about resources for students, especially on campus, there has to be a difference, right? My first time around for college at the University of Texas, when I was 18 and 19, I was in a dorm, and luckily I was able to afford one of the little meal plans. So, you know, when I got to the cafeteria, great. But if I didn't, because I was studying or doing, you know, whatever at the library or office hours, and I didn't make it to the cafeteria, well, all I had in my dorm was a microwave. So, like, what was I gonna cook with that? You know, like, and yeah, you could have your microwavable meals, but a lot of those are heavily salted, right? And if you're a student with, I don't know, high blood pressure, that's not great for you. A lot of nutrient deficient foods. So it's a little difficult. So Rachel, in programming an on-campus food bank versus an off-campus food bank, how do you keep that in mind? How much different might it be, considering that some of those students don't have like the full kitchen accessory to make like an actual meal? I mean, not ramen.
Let's start with why there needs to be a pantry on campus. First and foremost, schools have dining halls, or if they're a community college, they'll have cafe, a bodega style, something to get something at.
Sure.
And at our typical four-year schools, students can't always afford the meals, right? Which begs the question, is this here to feed students, or is this here as a revenue source?
Right.
And largely because our higher education funding system is so broken, schools do have to treat food as a revenue source to help fund the cost of other things on campus. So the food that's currently there is inaccessible to many students that are low income and food insecure.
Yes.
So we create stopgap measures like food pantries or like meal swipe donation programs. And the difference between a school's pantry and a community pantry is primarily location, being able to have, so fun trivia, how many colleges in the US do you all think have food pantries on them? Throw out a number. Five.
Love that.
Many more than 5.
I feel like I'd be cheating if I gave an answer though.
It's something around 900. There are 900 colleges, you knew. There are something like 900 colleges in the United States that have food pantries. And it's not just in the US. Awesome. Over the past few years, Canada, Mexico, we have 18 other countries that we're working with to help them start programs as well.
Wow.
Our schools have recognized, and I'll say when I started Swipe Out Hunger 12 years ago as a college student, to get a university administrator to admit that they have hungry students, nearly impossible. They wanted this image, this reputation, especially, I'll say, at our HBCUs, at our minority serving institutions.
Really?
Because they're confronting that already. They want to be able to say, especially very nice, like, the top schools, Koff Spellman, wanted to be like, no,
exactly
like, we are where so the reputation is a challenge at every school that we try to work with. As the time went by, as data started to come out from the Hope Center in 2016, 17, 18, where administrators couldn't deny it anymore. There was data, there was research, there were stories coming out. And so the UC system went from also not really acknowledging it to finally saying, okay, as California, which we're always ahead of the curve, we're gonna finally step up and do something about this. So huge movement in California starts acknowledging that this is an issue.
It's amazing.
They fund pantries, they hire full-time people whose job it is to help students enroll in SNAP, right? Formerly known as food stamps. We start to actually build the infrastructure that we need. And from there, we start to ask the question, is there baby food in our pantries? Are there diapers? Is there dog food? Are we helping students connect to other resources as well? So we need to build a new kind of college where those resources are inherently there. And food is not seen as a revenue source, but as a basic right, where we have dining halls, and there's also another option.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And just the fact that we're moving in the right direction offers me more hope, and because at the end of the day, we're not gonna sit here and beat this over anyone's head because we know this is a real problem, but the fact that people are moving into the right direction to say, let's actually address it together is great. Because at the end of the day, no one at South by Southwest EDU want students to, not be successful.
And I'll just say, it goes to show, I was sitting with Matine earlier and I said, how many corporate partners do you have? And he's like, we've got a couple. I'm like, we have a couple too. And we don't want to, sometimes we'll work with a big food service provider, and I'll get an email from our students saying, how dare you work with that company that's paying their whatever, and this and that. And I say, 100%, you're totally right. But in order for us to solve this problem, we have to bring everyone to the table. We've sat at the table with companies whose values did not align with us, and no matter how much I said, this is where you need to meet us, they said no, we did not work with them, right? But there are many companies that when you challenge them and say, we need your resources, we need your infrastructure. So we work with food service companies. We work with companies like CHEG who are also invested in student success. We work with lawmakers, we work with students, we work with community nonprofits. You kind of have to bring everyone to the table in order to address something that's so systemic.
Yeah, exactly. So, sorry, Matine.
No, I was just going to agree. Like, I think a lot of times we think, especially in the nonprofit sector or social impact sector, that there is, and there is a reputation that you have to maintain, and you don't want to, get some backlash for bringing on a certain partner or something. But I think choosing not to engage is not going to solve the problem, right? Like, a lot of times the dollars that we're looking to fundraise for to make our mission happen can sometimes come from a little bit of, shady sources. But at the same time, we have
like
to...
you said that all quickly, like,
you sometimes read their values a little more, you read what they've done in the past, and you're like, that's not exactly what we're looking for. But at the same time, is there an opportunity to, talk to the people who are at these companies and say, here's why we're doing what we're doing, and here's why what you have done or what you have supported in the past might be wrong. I think most people are open to the conversation, but choosing to flat out not engage is, I think, a missed opportunity in general.
100%. And if I could add a level of nuance to it, because we're going here. It's
please.
As a nonprofit, you've chosen a clear vision for what success means, you should make whatever partnerships will help you get there, right? If you're simply taking that money so you can continue to exist without a clear end goal, without a clear vision, that is not helpful, right? In the end, that capitalist company will succeed over you. So I think it's always being really strategic and thoughtful of when you take dollars that you don't fully agree with, because there's a clear end goal.
Yeah.
And can you maybe elaborate on the strategy, right? Just for our audience, because we were talking about earlier just how diverse students are becoming and how much they need our help. You spoke on the importance of student parents and their help that they might need on campus food banks. From our research, over half of student parents are food insecure, which is 2 times the amount of students that are not student parents. And we have to figure out a way to address the full student, and there's not going to be one single organization who can do that, right? So we'll need to be able to work together, but strategically, right?
Yeah, I remember the story of a student, Soraya, who we worked with a few months ago. She's a student at the CUNY system. She grew up in poverty, experienced, once she got married, experienced domestic violence. She has 3 kids. During the pandemic, she was a student at the CUNY system studying criminal justice, wanting to go and become an investigator. She gets COVID, gets really sick, is on the verge of dropping out. One of her professors, who's in the CUNY system in New York, understands that students are whole students, gives her an extra 2 weeks. She finishes her degree. And one of the things that helped her do that was we helped her enroll her in food stamps, in SNAP. And having that extra $300 a month to be able to pay for groceries so she didn't have to work as much during especially those 2 weeks that she had the chance to finish her degree. Now she's literally in the police academy going and getting, it's like these tiny things that like you don't understand. I'm sure that Soraya would have finished no matter what, but under what cost, right? Under what circumstances do our students have to suffer to get the degree that they're gonna get? They're so resilient.
Yeah.
But it's a matter of us showing up in partnership with public assistance programs, with community nonprofits to make it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
We can always make it, even for ourselves. Like things don't have to be hard. As Adrienne Marie Brown says, like find the ease in things.
Yeah.
And that is like one of our core principles as a nonprofit. We don't have to do things in a way that's self-sacrificial. I think especially our generation. I mean, you were talking about social media apps I've never heard of today. So maybe
Yeah,
as
be careful there.
I won't lump us together, but I think we're especially invested in partnerships that help make our lives easier. I'm trying to make this a relay race,
Yeah.
right? I'm gonna pass it to you, you pass it to me. No marathons, no sprints anymore.
Yeah.
I think what you're kind of bringing to light here, though, is what makes nonprofits or social impact different is you have to humanize the issue. We aren't trying to shove people through some sort of streamlined process that is then going to give some sort of outcome. A lot of our scholars are so incredible. They are pursuing different paths, and then a scholar has some trouble all of a sudden that, hey, I'm not doing well in some of my classes because of X, Y, Z. As a provider, we're always thinking, we have this pressure from donors and X, Y, Z sources to say that our scholars are graduating, they're moving on, but at the same time, okay, do we have to invest another $500,000, help the student, cover the cost of X, Y, Z, but what is the return? What is the goal here? So I think a lot of times we have to pay attention to all of the things that are affecting students, and yes, we want to make it easier by also reaching out to people who can, support in what we can't offer. I think a lot of times nonprofits are trying to be a little bit too wide with their mission, and then all of a sudden get overwhelmed because they can't really do anything because their hands are tied. And I think what we really have to start building in this sector is just more and more collaboration. We're really focused on getting students to post-secondary education, but then we need to partner with organizations like Rachel to then make sure that when they're in higher education, they have access to food and all the other things that are affecting them. But it would be very ineffective, I think, for both of us to start picking up each other's work, because then we're like, oh gosh, now we're doing the same thing. Why don't we just work together?
Right. Especially because if the organization's already developed, right? Work together instead of against each other. I would like to go back about just the importance of knowing your students and knowing where they are economically. So the student you were working with, like you said, she almost dropped out. A third of students actually do drop out because of how food insecure they are. That's a lot of students that need to make the choice between eating or reading. And that's sad. And so, despite that, FAFSA actually knows a lot of economic data on students that can be used to actually work with the college campuses to maybe develop and get their own food bank on campus. I know that you've done some of that work, Rachel. For our audience, how would a school work with FAFSA to maybe receive a grant to program a food bank on campus?
So 2 things here. One is last week, Elizabeth Warren, praise be her, decided to put out a letter that had dozens of Congress people sign on, asking the head of USDA, Tom Vilsack, to have USDA and our schools talk to each other. Because when a student goes through K through 12 and they are receiving free breakfast and lunch, it's on their record what their family's income is. You have to fill out that information. Why don't we share that data with higher ed folks? Why is USDA not talking to the Department of Ed? It's all the government.
Yeah.
They're all in the same buildings in DC.
Yeah.
Just share this data so that when a student gets to college, alongside all the other emails that they get, alongside the loans they apply for, the grants they receive, they get one other thing that says, if you fill out this form, you're gonna get $180 a month for groceries. Why aren't we doing that, right? So there's this really simple data sharing. So again, Elizabeth Warren, if anyone knows Tom Vilsack or someone at USDA, please do. Luis, maybe you do. Anyone who knows Tom, please ask him why he you're on it?
Yay, thank you.
So there's this really basic data sharing we could be doing, because as we said, it's about sharing this information, having people be informed. And when it comes to what we've been talking about the immediate need. A lot of Swipe Out Hunger's work started in our advocacy space in 2017 when I got an email from a California state lawmaker, Monique Limon, who said, I saw how your program is helping a lot of students, and I want to help your program grow. If you were to write a bill that helped end college hunger, what would it say? And I freaked out. I'm a huge political nerd, and wrote a few different options and sent it to her office, and her office is like, we love this bill, the Hunger-Free Campus bill, which said to a college, if you put in the basic work, if you have a food pantry, if you're enrolling students in SNAP, if you have at least, some sort of like meal swipe program, then we'll give you money to help fund that work.
Yeah.
Went up to Sacramento, testified, had no idea what I was doing. A month later, the governor of California puts it into his budget, a $7.5 million line item to send funding directly to colleges to help fund this work. It changed the game because what happens when you put money on the table? People show up. Partners are ready to build coalitions, right?
Yeah.
California was doing this work, the country has been doing this work, but money helps bring people together. And we've since passed that bill alongside advocates on the ground who really saw what we did and took it to New Jersey, took it to Maryland, took it to Minnesota, and just 2 weeks ago we got it added to the Pennsylvania state legislature's budget, the governor's budget, and we have active campaigns in West Virginia, in Florida, in Chicago, in Illinois, in New York, in so many states, right?
Nice.
In California alone, we've sent over $70 million since that initial 7.5.
Wow.
So getting that funding to colleges is kind of our end goal, because once they have the funding, they have the community, they have the training, I don't need to tell them to do anything. They're doing it, right? Now it's their project. It's a part of what higher education is. So we want to build an actual solution here and get to the point where the universities have integrated this as a core part of their offerings.
Right.
Well, I mean, first snaps to that. Like,
Yeah.
awesome.
Major snaps.
I think, building off the point you just made about data, like every year when our scholarship closes, of course I really like, reading applications, I skim a few, and then, but what I really like doing is going to the round submission analysis, and I want to see all the what people answer to the questions, because we ask a lot of questions as far as, have you experienced food insecurity? Are you missing class? Like a lot of questions that will help us get a better picture of our demographic, and this is what helps inform our programming. A lot of times I think in social impact, we often forget to talk to the people that we're supporting about what they need. And a lot of times we paint this picture of, oh, you're a student experiencing homelessness. Well, I'm gonna tell you what you need because based on what I think. But then, we read how they respond to certain questions, what they're struggling with. And then we're like, oh, maybe our mentorship doesn't have to include, X, Y, Z, but what scholars are really telling us is they need more, career mentorship opportunity. They need to know more about how they can access food pantries on campus and things like that. So then how can we adjust our work to support them? So I think a lot of times you have to constantly go back to the people you're trying to support, but also pay attention to the numbers, what is coming in, and also having more data helps you understand your population a lot better. So we base kind of how much aid we give to students on, FAFSA reports, how much they're getting, what their expected family contribution is, and then how much they're getting in Pell Grants. And, you have to pay attention to a lot of those numbers because that just helps us paint a better picture of how we can be a more effective provider for them. So I think definitely talk to the people, and also as much data as there is, share it so that we can get a better picture. Because it's always changing too,
Yes.
We had all this data before COVID, and now it's pretty much all well, I don't know. The Department of Education says that the number of students experiencing homelessness has technically gone down since COVID came. I mean, that's not true. We know that. That's just because they're not in classrooms and in buildings anymore. We can't track them as well.
Right.
So that's not a good thing.
Right,
so,
yeah.
having those numbers, especially now during COVID, you have to really pay attention.
Yeah, and I was gonna actually ask you about that. So with the data that you're seeing, what are maybe some of the biggest changes from since the beginning of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think, and I think this brings to light an inequality that exists within already serving a disadvantaged population. A lot of times students who are applying to our program, we also have to consider the fact that they have figured out how to find the resources in their schools and whatever to then apply to XYZ scholarship program. We're probably leaving out a good portion of the population that doesn't have access to technology, that can't apply to our program in the first place. So we have to be very careful of looking at the whole picture. But in general, I think a lot of times there is an assumption that students who are experiencing homelessness, for example, have no access to the internet and have no access to technology. overwhelmingly, a lot of the students who do apply to our program do have some form of technology access. They have a computer. Now, they might not have stable internet access, but they go to cafes and things like that. Or when they're in the education system, especially in higher education, their schools, they can log online like that. So, especially when the CARES Act first passed, there was a lot of support for technology access. So, not that it's not a need anymore, but overwhelmingly, people are like, well, your scholarship program's not really going to work because how are they going to get on the computer in the first place? And I'm like, I think you need to revisit and kind of understand this demographic and not let your stigma play into it. But
of course they have access to technology for the most part. They will find a way. They're students, right? So whether it's on-campus libraries or internet cafes, like you said, they're gonna, like you were saying earlier, they're gonna try and finish. That's really what they're there to do, right? Is to get their education to succeed, whether that's academically or professionally. So, as far as major next steps for this audience, right? What are some really tangible things that they can do as soon as they walk out of this door to either work with programs like you all's to address food insecurity, houselessness, or beyond?
Lay it on them.
Sure. I think that was a beautiful transition because the first thing you can do is ask the people you want to serve what their needs are. Understanding where people are coming from, what they already have. In Skid Row, I live in Los Angeles, and in Skid Row, in a single day, you can get 44 meals. There's no lack, we don't need to get more food to Skid Row, right? You have to ask people what they actually need. So first and foremost, as we just said, talking to the people you seek to serve, or finding people who are more equipped to speak to them, to report back to you, right? Our model is based on student leaders running all of our programs, and that's the best way to get data, because a friend is going to complain to a friend immediately if a program doesn't work. If the hours are off, the food's not good, and you get that data immediately, not in 6 months when you get a survey. So after that, what people can do is make sure that you vote for people in your state legislature that are funding higher education. The state legislature of Arizona has fully defunded community colleges. Community colleges in Arizona only get funding from the federal government right now. So that's state legislatures. We're completely not paying attention to what's happening at the state level when that's where a lot of decisions are being made. So pay attention to the state level. And after that, I want everyone to call their alma mater and say, how are you helping college students? How are you helping this next generation? Do you have a pantry? Is your pantry working with your food bank? Do you have scholarship programs? Do you have a laptop program? How are you helping them, right?
Whenever the University of Texas sends me the emails about donations, I'm just gonna respond right back with what you said. So how are you, what are you doing more on campus? Maybe I'll donate.
I think it goes back to the awareness. If people know that people are watching, they'll take action.
Yeah,
I think you brought up a good point that a lot of times when we're in this space, we think, oh, we just need to continue to pour more and more resources, and that's not a bad thing. I do think there's definitely more resources needed. But sometimes it's actually about tuning up those resources to figure out, how do we make sure that the people that we're trying to provide it for are actually accessing it? On our scholarship, for example, we ask all of our students, do you know what have you filed your FAFSA report? Well, overwhelmingly, they all say yes, probably 20% of them say no. And then we say, what's your expected family contribution? They write it. And then we write, how much are you getting in Pell Grants? And they say, I don't know. And we're like, oh, well, it's on the same form. So clearly what's happening here is they just don't know how to read it. So it's not that there's not, but they could honestly go through their, education space without even knowing that. So a lot of times, it's not that, resources don't exist entirely, and of course there has to be more, but sometimes it's how are we as providers also thinking about ways that we can make it really explicitly easy for them to access it. A lot of times we forget, we get wrapped up in our own terminology that we kind of use in this space. These are students. They don't know what you're talking about when you say what your EFC is. You kind of have to write, show them a picture of the form, make things very, very easy. And a lot of times some of the call-outs I would say, again, is talk to the students that you're supporting. If you're running some sort of program, do you have students who are being affected by this at the table talking to you? Do you have people who are, working with those students at the table as well? we run this great scholarship program. We design these questions, put together this program, but we have homelessness liaisons read it. We have our scholars read it, and we say, what here is inaccessible? And a lot of times they'll be like, well, this is a really nicely phrased question, but I don't know what you're talking about here. Like, or, you know, I could have taken it this way, or I don't know where to find this. This is really inaccessible to ask. So really, really talk to the people you're serving and try and understand how to make your program or your work as easy as possible for them to understand and get from step A to step B. The other thing I think, and Rachel probably applies to you as well, is just with higher education in general and accessing students, we don't have a button necessarily that says we want to reach every college student in the United States to, you know, get us, you know, more students volunteering with either of our programs. So a lot of times that we need more support from is, you know, institutions themselves, administrators, kind of making less red tape for our programs to get into their schools. I think a lot of times there is a little bit of hoops that we have to drum through to kind of get, you know, in the space and in the door. And I'll be honest, anytime I've talked to a group of students about Equals work or talked at any sort of conference, I've never really had anyone say that they're not interested in participating. So I know your students are interested in, but maybe I'd just challenge to people who have access to those students, are you giving, you know, leaders in the nonprofit sector the space to come meet your students? Because it's not that easy to just get in touch with a bunch of young people overnight.
Yeah, no. Either they're studying or they're tired or whatever. They're always on the move. Your points there, again, we go back to accessibility, right? If someone doesn't know that there's another side to the form or it's language that is so above them, quite frankly, it can be really frustrating and emotionally, mentally taxing. And this is we're already speaking about a group of students who have a lot on their plate. So when you log into a government website that might not look the best, and you're navigating some site that looks like it was built in the early 2000s, and you're answering questions that you really don't know the answer to, sometimes you just want to give up. You're like, I'd rather, okay, I need to get back to studying. I'd rather do that. This is something that I can actually feel like I'm doing versus navigating. It's just, it's accessibility.
I mean, you also have to remember that, especially when it comes to higher education, overwhelmingly, a lot of our students are on the brink of saying, I'm not going anyways. And if you're gonna make it harder, then it's just gonna, like, I'm not even gonna invest more time in this. Like, it's already 3 a.m., I haven't had anything to eat, and now you want me to fill out this application, and it's asking me these questions that I can't ask mom and dad for this and that. So you know what, maybe college is just like, I don't know what to do here. Like, I'm just moving on. So you have to be, like, very sensitive to the fact that a lot of times students are kind of on the brink of saying no, too. You're asking me to pay some thousands of dollars every single year to get some, you know, sheet of paper. I haven't had any family go to college and they're fine, you know, or they're not, but like whatever, that's how life works. So, so you know, that I think, you know, the walls are really like stacked against them, and I think a lot of times we're just like, oh, you know, follow this process. Well, you know, are you paying attention to the whole process and how easy it is?
Exactly. No, you're right.
I think that one of the favorite sectors I've seen really develop is education technology in the startup space, because there's a lot of people that are developing ed tech that is, you know, no more serious than a 4th grade reading level, that only asks just what the technology needs. One of my friends, David, runs a company called Equity that provides emergency grants, right? $500 grants to students that need it. They partner with schools, and they, you know, right now to get an emergency grant from a school takes like weeks. It's really difficult, it takes such a long time, but Equity helps them get it in 24 hours, super simple form, working through the school's process. Seeing things like that happen, where he went from like no schools to now working with over a dozen schools, is what gives me hope that there are tech solutions that are coming in to help replace the language that no one understands.
Yeah, and that's so important. Matine, I wanted to ask you, in your leadership as someone who's Gen Z, coming from a millennial,
Ooh.
yeah, I know, I'm barely making it. A lot has changed. And something that I have found amongst Gen Z is, honestly, I'm just very proud of them. I think that they're a generation that said, you know what, I'm not going to take any crap. I am going to stand up for myself, for the future, because they are our future, you know? And I'm constantly amazed by students and people like you. You're a shining star amongst them. What do you think might be some of the bigger differences in nonprofit leadership between Gen Z and the other generations?
Yeah, I mean, a few things come to mind. I think in general, our approach to social issues has just gotten a lot more bold. You know, a lot of people talk to us about like, well, my hands are tied because of this or that, and we're kind of like, well, isn't that your job? Like, fix it. You know, like, okay, you know, you have the money, and at the same time, you're problematic. Like, we're gonna tell you that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure everyone's been on social media platforms where Gen Z is kind of just saying what they're thinking, you know, at the same time, really pushing these larger companies and brands to really like call them out on what we really think is not the right way to approach, you know, issues. And at the same time, while I think young people are really working hard and are active, I do think there's a lot of burnout too. I think there is a feeling that the voices are kind of being muted, and that, you know, maybe people don't really care as much about the change that we want to see. But at the same time, like looking at every big social movement that has happened in the last 10 years, like who are in all the pictures, who are the people leading it? They're all young people. And I think that's really, really inspiring. And I think that brings in the digital age for sure. You know, aside from TikTok trends and things like that, you know, it's wildfires. It spreads so quickly. Messages spread so quickly. Knowledge is really accessible. I think Gen Z is pretty woke overall. Like we know what's up when it comes to why certain problems exist. And I think that's a lot to do with social media, making it a lot easier to access information and see what is happening. There's kind of no denying. And at the same time, with the click of a button, I have a voice. I can tag whatever company that I think is doing something wrong, or you know, whatever thing that exists that we don't want it to happen. And I think overwhelmingly that is gaining traction. So I mean, even in Equals work, we invest a lot in social media. That's like how we reach people. That's how we reach young people. And you know, yes, we like to do our like, you know, tippy top Instagram posts to, you know, feel good activism at the same time, but we also like to call things out. So we like to stir the pot a little bit and say, here's what it is. Like, no more trying to beat around the bush. I think we just got to be up front because we really want to see real change happen. And at the same time, we don't have time to beat around the bush anymore. Like, y'all have tried that. I'm just kidding.
The truth. It's
not a lie. It's not a lie.
No, I can completely see that, because I guess I felt there was a little bit more of a, not a hope, but just, okay, if we keep doing this, if we keep voting in this way, it'll change, right? And here we are. It's 2022.
Yeah, I mean, there's this moment where, so I always thought I was very idealistic, but we had some students at Spelman who reached out to us and said they wanted to start a Swipe Out Hunger program. And we taught them how to do it. It went through the process. The school said, we're working on some construction. Let's circle back in a few months. And our students were not ready to circle back in a few months. They decided the next day to host a press conference where they announced a hunger strike. They said, we are not going to eat anything. We're just going to drink water until our school adopts this program.
Wow.
And when they called me saying they wanted to do this, I was like, are you sure? Like, maybe try 1 or 2 more meetings, like use it as a threat, you know, like don't do it yet, you know, use it as a threat first. And they're like, no, like my friend that I sit next to every day is hungry. Like, why would I wait a single day, right? So I think it's this like, just, you're totally right. Like, we kept believing in the system that like institutions will show up for us, that like the system will work. And I think the difference in your generation is that you don't believe in institutions, you believe in people. You believe in each other, you believe in yourselves, and you're like, this is the only thing we can trust. And so you hold hands and you move forward, and it's really inspiring. And I think it's so important for me and all of us to spend more time with your generation, and for you to learn from us. We have some things to teach you too. But
I have nothing.
But it's actually essential. We have to
Yeah.
pave the way. There needs to be a mass retiring soon. I don't know. We need to we need to create universal health care and social services and all the things so that everyone can comfortably retire and have a safety net.
Yeah.
So the next generation can step up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I do have one thing. I did eventually learn how to do my hair.
Which is not easy.
I just shaved it off.
There you go.
Yeah. I found a solve.
Yeah.
I was innovative.
Yeah.
I think Rachel's bringing a good point that a lot of the resistance we are facing, we might, choose to channel it in a little bit of a bold way. And I think that's what you should expect. At the same time, maybe message to other generations, specifically our older ones, is try and welcome this change a little bit more. Can you support us? I'm here because one of my 8th grade teachers took a chance on me when 2 8th graders said, can we use your social security number to fill out this form for the IRS? Because we're both 14 years old and we can't do it ourselves.
Oh my God.
And she said yes. And now, we've distributed 50,000 products and we're, have thousands of dollars in scholarships and millions of people reached online. I don't want to say don't ask as many questions, but at the same time, if the energy is there, give us a chance and really listen. I think a lot of young people feel especially frustrated because they might not have fancy degrees yet and then people aren't taking them seriously. But, a lot of these things, it's very obvious. There's a problem on campus. Here's what needs to happen. You don't want to do it, so we're going to put a little bit of a roadblock in front of you because this is what needs to happen.
And they were successful. They got 14,000 meals donated immediately.
Look at that.
That's
Right?
amazing.
It's incredible.
Yeah. And it's funny when we talk about us believing in the institutions and believing that it'll work eventually, even though we know for a fact it didn't work. It didn't work for me.
Nope.
So I don't know why. We went through the same things and we still were just kind of, I guess change will happen. Well, thank you for making it happen.
Yeah.
Rachel, you spoke at South by Southwest 3 years ago about the issues of food insecurity on college campuses. It's been 3 years. What changes have you seen since? What progress have we made? I know we've talked about some of the implementations in California and the other states, but any more great things?
Yeah, I mean, when I spoke here in 2019, we had maybe 100 campuses working with us. Now we have 435.
Yeah.
We had legislation only pass in California and New Jersey, and now, as I mentioned, we're in 11 states pushing legislation, including Oklahoma. A GOP state legislator in Oklahoma who helped start his food pantry on campus now got elected, said, I want to champion this issue, right? So as you said, it's exposing people who will then become the decision makers, even if they themselves were not beneficiaries. That makes a difference. So.
Yeah.
I'm extremely hopeful. I would not show up to my nonprofit job every day if I didn't have hope that something is going to be different, right?
Yeah.
Because I said yes to my friend 12 years ago, there's now 400 plus colleges that the students there know that their school has their back.
Yeah.
There are legislators that are making this their number one issue. There are students that didn't know how powerful they were until they called us or they called Equal and said, I want to make a difference. And they sat across from the administrator and stood their ground and said, I need to step up here. So I have no choice but to be hopeful because I think if you are in action, then you have cause for hope.
Yeah.
And the moment you stop being in action, it's no wonder that you lose your hope. You kind of have to have one driving the other.
What are some things that a leader of a larger nonprofit can do to remain grounded and remain as amplified as they were on the first day?
Oh my gosh, it's a great question. This is like a double-edged sword of if you ever think that you've done a good job. I was always afraid if I let myself think I did a good job that I'd lose what drove me every day.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you need to know that you've done good work. So staying really humble, remembering the enormity, remembering the pain that people are going through, and keeping that as a focus and not what you've done.
Yeah.
Then how dare you spend time doing anything other than continuing to stay focused on the work. So
Right.
I think that and not taking things personally. There's a lot of people that have we're all people, we all have shit, and you interact with each other,
Yeah.
and that stuff gets to you, and it might make you think that you should not keep going, but never take things personally. Just focus on the work.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I would like to thank you both so much for having not only an enlightening conversation, a fun conversation, and just letting the audience know that we're going to do this. We are going to solve this problem because at the end of the day, the students are our future. And how can our future be successful if they aren't? So thank you all for being here. I hope that you can walk away, you walk out the door, and you're like, I've got some to-dos. I've got some next items on my list to help the students that I know and that I love. Thank you so much.